I think we're live.
We are live. Ole, good morning, good
live.
afternoon. Can we see the plushie? Let's do a quick video test right there. There is a plushie,
That's why
nice
you're
and
here.
sharp.
You just want to see the plushie. send
Good
you one.
morning, good afternoon, and good evening, wherever you're joining us from. If you're here for the Testkube AI, and I'm going to brag a little bit more about that. If you're here for the highly awaited Testkube AI, the future of testing is here webinar
Highly awaited.
with our one and only Ole Lensmar. You are in the right place. We started a few seconds earlier because there's a quick ceremony that Ule and I like to do while we let all of you dial in. We have quite a bit of an audience today, so we want to make sure that everybody's in before we get started. So again, welcome everyone. If you're here for Testkube AI, you're in the right place.
Welcome.
Ole, how are you? How is everything going?
I'm great, Lucio. How are you?
I'm excellent. Very happy to be here. But let me ask you, and if you don't mind sharing with the audience, where are you located today? And if you can tell us a little bit about the weather this afternoon.
Weather, of course. I'd love to talk about the weather. I am just located just a little bit outside of Stockholm in Sweden, and the weather is actually really nice. It's kind of warming up. It's still very light. It's like 7 p.m. It's beautiful outside. It's the best time of year. So if you're ever going to go to Stockholm, Sweden, this is the time to come. End of May, beginning of June.
Does it ever get hot out there? I have like this very wrong view of anywhere in Europe is very cold and gloomy.
Not by your standards. It doesn't get hot. It doesn't go. It gets warm, but it doesn't go over like 30 degrees Celsius. I don't know what's that, 90, 85. 90,
yeah, about 80, 88.
So,
quick math.
It's unusual, although it's getting warmer here. But it's really nice. But I mean, don't keep the audience waiting, Lucio. How is the weather?
I'm
where you are, and where are you?
I'm in Orlando, Florida. For those of you who are or may not be curious, today we are at exactly 89 degrees right now, and the high is going to be 90, and it's sunny and a little bit cloudy. So beautiful day here as well for those of you who may enjoy the heat of late spring, early summer. But I think we are good to go. Ole, what do you say we go ahead and kick this party off?
Let's do this. Let me see.
Alrighty. Again, welcome everyone. If you're here for the Testkube AI webinar, you're in the right place. I will be your MC today, and we also have with us Ole Lensmar, our CTO here at Testkube. Before we get started, there are a couple of things that I want to run by the audience, a couple of housekeeping items. We have a QA session at the end of the webinar. However, this is your time. We prepare this for you to understand what Testkube AI is about, to understand what Testkube is about. And we're going to give you a lot of details. And we also want you to ask a lot of questions. But please do me a super, super favor. Do not wait until the end of the session to ask those questions that you may have. There is a Q&A button right there in the panel that you are using to watch this webinar. So go ahead and click that, put your question, we'll queue it up, and then as soon as we can, we'll get to it. I'll be in the background trying to answer questions for Ole, and if I cannot get to that, Ole will try to answer, and worst case scenario, we'll follow up with you via email. This webinar also will be available on demand starting tomorrow. And then, so if in the unlikely case that you need to jump off, you can always go ahead and watch it and start where you left off. And last but not least, please go ahead and visit testkube.io/AI, where you will find all the details about the amazing things that we're going to discuss today.
Amazing things.
Exciting. Everything is going to be so cool. So before I pass the time to Ole, things that we're going to discuss today in the next few minutes, we're going to tell you all about we're going to give you a quick overview of Testkube, just in case you are brand new here, don't know, or are getting to know us today. And also we are going to talk about all those AI-induced bottlenecks in the testing world. We understand the pains that you're going through, and we want to show you that. And then we're going to give you the introduction of Testkube AI. Ole is going to talk to us about these, all the cool features, and then followed by a demo that we have prepared for you. And there is also some of these features you will understand or learn today that are under the early access program. So we're going to explain to you how you can join, how you can get started, what is in it for you, and also Ule is going to give us as we talked earlier about, we are going to have the Q&A session. So without further ado, Ule, the time is yours. Take us
Amazing. Thank you so much, Lucio. And once again, ask questions, please. Feel free to interrupt. I'm here and we're here for you. Okay, so just kind of a level set. Not everyone has heard of Testkube yet. We're working on that. Just to give you a little bit of a background. So Testkube is the open testing platform for AI-driven engineering teams. And breaking that down into something a little bit more tangible, Testkube is a platform that allows you to run your tests inside your clusters. It provides a control plane that then manages all your tests and makes that accessible from your dashboard through CLI, APIs, and MCP Server, or from your CI/CD tools. It's open, meaning that it's vendor agnostic, meaning that it can run any kind of test. So it's not tied to a specific testing framework or tool. You can run your end-to-end tests, your API tests, your load tests, your security tests, your conformance tests, whatever you might be using today. Testkube will be able to take that framework and run it in its execution engine. It's also open in the sense that it has an open core, an open source core component that you can get on GitHub and you can use to kind of explore the platform and many of its core features. It's cloud native, meaning that it runs inside your existing Kubernetes environment. And that's also what it leverages to do a lot of the magic that it can do. It also means that it's running in your infrastructure. So Testkube is an on-prem product in the sense that it's not a cloud execution solution. It's not something that where you have to outsource the execution of tests. It's always running inside your infrastructure, both for security, for performance, and for compliance, and of course for also making the most of the infrastructure that you already have and running the tests as closely to your applications and your services as possible. And finally, what we're here to talk about today is that it's AI native, meaning that Testkube has really AI infused into the platform. Testkube and Testkube AI features, they know about your tests, your environments, your test execution history, your dependencies, everything related to all the tests that you're running with all the frameworks that you're using in your Kubernetes infrastructure, which is then all exposed through different AI features under the Testkube AI umbrella, which is what we're here to talk about more. Jumping ahead here, let's talk about the testing bottlenecks that we see today with our existing customers and people that we talk to, that they're kind of facing by the AI-driven pipeline, meaning people are onboarding more and more AI to write more and more tests. And write more and more code, which needs more tests. So an initial bottleneck is just having test coverage or tests for all the code that you are creating or that your teams are creating with AI. The next bottleneck, once you have all those tests, either if you created them manually or if you use even AI to generate them, is that you need to run them. So you run into a test execution bottleneck. You're running many more tests than you used to before, and your pipelines, your CI/CD tools, or whatever you might be using become kind of the stopping point for all the tests that you've hopefully written to alleviate the first bottleneck. And the third bottleneck is around test analysis. So let's say you've pushed through all these tests that you've written to kind of fix the other bottlenecks. Now someone needs to analyze all those tests and look at failed tests, because some tests will fail, and try to detect anomalies and why is this test slowing down and all those kind of things. So these are kind of bottlenecks, all driven by just the amazingness of AI helping us maybe be more efficient at writing applications and code early on in the life cycle. And what these bottlenecks usually lead to when on the test creation side is that you have low test coverage, which of course could result in buggy code. I'm sure you're familiar with that. AI doesn't always have the whole picture, so it might be solved. If you ask it to implement some feature, it might not be aware of that implementation has ripple effects, and you'll need to hedge for those to create your to make sure that bugs don't escape. The bottleneck and the frustration you'll see from contentious builds is obvious, right? Instead of being able to run your tests and your builds in 5 or 10 minutes. Now the team has to wait 20, 25 minutes, which obviously can be extremely frustrating if you're in a hurry and you're shipping a lot of stuff. And then finally, if you have a lot of issues showing up in your pipelines, the MTR, medium time to resolution, for flakiness, for just failed tests, or for anything related to tests, can really skyrocket. You can think of all of these things amplifying each other, which can, of course, stall releases and decrease release confidence. And these are things that we've heard, of course, from our customers, and that's what we want to target with Testkube AI, which is what we're here to talk about today. So Testkube AI is, as I said before, it's really the AI functionality that we've infused into the Testkube platform. And it rests on three main pillars. One is AI test creation, which is where I'm going to show you all of this, is the capability to use AI to create and auth your tests inside Testkube, and then, of course, immediately run those tests using the Testkube execution runtime. The next is AI agents, which you can define to do almost any task related to testing and quality. So agents could be used to optimize how you run your tests, which tests you run. Agents could be used, of course, to triage why a test failed. Agents could be used to remediate, to suggest kind of fixes if they have access to your source code and any other context they might need to do those things. But agents can do many more things. They can be used to generate reports or do more long-term analysis of your testing efforts. They can be used as quality gates, and they can be used for flakiness analysis. And all it's really up to you, depending on what and context you give an agent access to through MCP servers, and the prompts that you craft and the models that you use, and then how you inject those agents into your testing pipeline. And then, of course, Testkube becomes the orchestration platform, not just for your tests, but for your AI agents to work on those tests and test results as well. And of course, there's an MCP server, because that's a natural thing to have today, which allows you to interact with Testkube from your IDE tool, your IDE AI tooling, your AI IDEs like Cursor or Claude or whatever, but also from your other agent frameworks that you might be using to automate your tasks. So if we go back to how Testkube AI specifically helps with these bottlenecks, AI test creation is obviously the thing that is going to help you with test creation. So, and test coverage is really one of the main asks we have from our customers. People ask, can Testkube AI help us write more tests, or help us kind of close the coverage gap that we're seeing introduced by using AI to generate more code? Testkube agents can help you to both be more efficient on test execution and on test analysis. You could create agents that can select which tests to run, maybe prioritize which tests to run first. If you need to run a bunch of tests, you might want to, in sequence, you might want to run the one that's most likely to fail first, so you don't have to run all the other ones unnecessarily. You could also use agents to optimize the configurations of your tests, maybe to kind of adjust the sharding of your playwright test, or adjust the memory allocations of your JMeter or K6 tests to be as efficient as possible. Because once again, Testkube and Testkube agents have access to all historical data for your test executions that have been running in your infrastructure. And then, of course, post-execution, test agents can do investigate failed test results. They can do triaging. They can do deep root cause analysis. They can do remediation in the sense that they can suggest fixes to, maybe why the test failed. If you give an agent access to your source code, it could look at the recent commits. It could look at why the test failed. Maybe it can figure out, oh, this was actually the change that resulted in the test failing, and it could open a pull request for you. You should definitely have a human in the loop there to approve that. I'm still not entirely swayed by the whole self-healing aspect, but definitely getting there. And as you kind of build trust in the prompts that you've built and the agents that you've defined and the models that you're using, maybe some level of autonomous or automatic remediation is something that you'll get to eventually. And of course, the MCP server can help you across all of these steps from external tools, right? So you could be using, you could be writing code in you're maybe using Claude to write code, and then you could, using Testkube MCP server, you could say, hey, run these tests against the updates that I've built in this service. It'll run the test for you, it'll give you the results, and then you can do an analysis and then Claude could, or the model that you're using could associate the test results with the changes that you've made to the code locally. So there's a lot of ways you can tie this into the your workflow while you're developing and testing and operating your environment. True story here is that we actually, when we kind of finalized Testkube agents, AI agents in one of the earlier initial iterations, and I was kind of going through the backlog of things that our customers or users have been asking for, it was really astounding to realize that a lot of the features that people have been asking for are things that you can now do with AI agents, and we could more or less remove them from the list and include these either as examples or templates in the product itself. So for example, automatic reruns, a very common request. If a test is flaky, I would like it to run automatic. If it fails and it's deemed to be flaky or a flaky failure, I want it to run automatically. Perfect use case for an AI agent. The AI agent can look at, when a test fails, it can look at the failure. It can try to compare that to previous results and decide, okay, this does look like a flaky test. I'm going to rerun it for you. Another one is like flakiness detection and remediation. If it does detect that it's flaky, it could rerun it, but it could also kind of try to figure out, okay, what is causing the flakiness? And maybe it could suggest if you could, once again, give the agent access to the MCP servers for, I don't know, your operational metrics or your runtime environment or whatever else, or source code or configurations, it can detect kind of what was actually causing the failure and suggest how to fix that. A very common use case that people have asked us about is just integrating with issue trackers, right? And there's a lot of issue trackers out there, and there's obviously Jira and Linear, and I don't know, those are two ones come to mind, but there's so many more. And of course, there's a bunch of other tools around collaboration and notifications and test management. And this very common ask is can Testkube work with those tools and work intelligently with those tools, right? If I have a test failure, I'd like to get a nice analysis why that test failed and open an issue in whatever tool I'm using. This is a perfect use case for AI, and since almost all tools today have MCP servers, it's also very easy to put into place. Anomaly detection, another one, is a common ask. Can Testkube kind of look at executions over time and say, hey, this is slowing down or it's consuming more memory, and it could, based on that, say, hey, you should bump up the memory you're allocating to your, I don't know, K6 test, for example, or whatever. And all of these things AI agents can do now. It'll take you some prompting to get it right, and to make sure you have all the right tools in place. But ultimately, these are just examples, kind of top of mind, but AI agents in general, if you're kind of thorough with how you prompt, so to avoid kind of non-deterministic results, can go extremely far, which is kind of super interesting and obviously super good for our users and customers. Because then, okay, they can do all of these things under a generic framework that we've provided in the product. Okay, that's a lot of talk. I'm going to jump straight into a demo. Of course, demoing has its challenges, and I'm going to demo a non-deterministic technology to you, AI. So what can go wrong? Let's see how things work out. Before I'm going to jump to the demo, I do realize many of you here are new to Testkube, so I'm just going to do a very, very, very high-level overview of what Testkube is, and just to kind of level set a little bit, and what it looks like. So what we're looking at here is the dashboard exposed by the Testkube control plane, if you remember that slide a little bit earlier. Testkube uses a concept of a test workflow as its abstraction to run tests. So a test workflow can run any kind of test. And you can actually, these are actually our internal tests that we run for Testkube on a daily basis. And you can see here a bunch of different type of tests. These are end-to-end tests. We're usually using Playwright, but there's also tests using PyTests, and there's tests using K6, and a bunch of different type of tests that we're running. And these are all abstracted as test workflows. And the reason I'm going to home a little on that, because I'm going to get back to it a little bit later. And for each test workflow that can be triggered then from my CI/CD tool, for example, I can run these test workflows from GitHub Actions or Jenkins or etc. So we're not asking you to replace your CI tool. We're asking you to outsource test execution from your CI tool to Testkube, but of course the rest of your pipelines should still stay in CI or CD. These are all the executions. So these are all the tests or workflows that I've run in my environment. I'm just going to filter. These are all the failed ones, and these are the past ones, etc. And of course, I can filter and slice and dice this data. We run thousands of tests every day on the platform itself. And we've tagged these workflows in ways that work for us, but you could tag these workflows based on your team or your application or your whatever you might want to, and then create filters and reporting and all those kind of things on top of that. That's where I'm going to stop at the very high level, just because test workflows and executions are kind of core to also many of the AI features. I'm going to get back to that. There's obviously a lot more you can do with Testkube, and if you go to the documentation or the website, and there's a lot more to read, or just get in touch afterwards if you want a more thorough demo of all the other stuff. Okay, let's jump back to Testkube AI. So the first thing I'm going to show you is the test creation, which is really the new feature that we have not made publicly available yet. We're going to, we have an EAP program that you can join. We'll talk a little bit about that later. And what I'm going to show you here is still an internal mock-up. So this is not the actual working or not the actual how it's going to look at the end, but it's kind of what we're working towards. So the idea here is really to be I don't know, for lack of a better comparison, lovable for automated testing, right? We want you to be able to prompt whatever kind of test you might want to create. And since we can run with any framework, we're not tying you down, you have to use Playwright for end-to-end tests, or you have to use K6 for performance tests. If you want Testkube to generate a Cypress test for you, or a Selenium test for you, or a JMeter test, or an artillery test, or a postman collection, whatever, AI is very capable at generating code and that kind of stuff. So Testkube will be able to do that, and then also take those tests and run those tests immediately inside your infrastructure against your actual application. So let's have a look at what that could look like. I'm just going to use a demo prompt here for creating an API test. So what's happening here is I've simulated a prompt to ask it to generate an API test for a REST endpoint. And what it's doing now is these are the skills that we've built internally for API testing, is that it's exploring the API itself and it's generating the postman collections for that API. And once it's done that, it's actually going to run that test using Newman and to show you the results, to kind of see what that test worked like. And in this specific case, the initial generated test for Newman failed. So it kind of went back and say, hey, something went wrong here. I'm just going to recreate that test and improve it. So this all went pretty quick, but I'm going to recap what happened here. So the Testkube here, the AI in Testkube generated a postman collection for the API that I wanted to test. You can see the postman collections files that it generated here in the middle. I can click them and I can use AI prompts as I would do in other tools to refine these postman collections and ask it to add assertions and try some other endpoints, etc. It also generates the workflow. This is what I talked about earlier, and then runs that workflow inside my infrastructure. And here you can see the output from the postman execution. And this is where the power really comes into play here. This test is running where Testkube is running in my infrastructure. So I could be running this test immediately against an API in my staging environment. So you can think of the use case saying, hey, someone's saying, hey, our authentication service is acting up in staging. Could you have a look? So you could go in here and say, hey, I need an API test for the authenticate endpoint in the authentication service and run that in my staging environment. Testkube will generate that collection for you. You might have to iterate a little bit on it to get it right. And then it can immediately run that for you in the environment, right? So there's no need of you to build it locally and then to figure out, okay, now how do I automate that in CI/CD? How do I get it into the production environment where I want to run it? Testkube, of course, also has data for any previous tests that you've run against that authentication service. So it can factor that into when it creates your tests. And in that case, build really tests that are really applicable to what you're actually doing. I'll show you another example. Let's go back to the prompt here for a K6 test, so a performance test. So here it's just a dummy prompt, build a performance test with K6. So you're going to see here it's going to explore an API and it's going to start generating K6 test file. K6 is a very common testing tool, load testing tool which uses TypeScript for the actual tests. You can see here it's generating those tests and it's running those again in my environment, and these tests failed. It didn't live up to the performance criteria that I wanted, so it's going to go back and try to improve those tests to give me a better result. And here's the ultimate output, once again, of that K6 text that was immediately generated by Testkube. Once again, the use case, someone goes to you and says, hey, there's some performance issue with, I don't know, the search service in our dev environment. Could you check that out? You could immediately say, hey, I need to check the search endpoint. Could you create a K6 test to make me do that and run that in our dev environment? As you can see, I can generate the test, but I can also take that test, immediately run it, and look at those results. And I'm going to also show you how then you can use AI to analyze those results and maybe troubleshoot and understand what might be going wrong.
Well, since you are in the test creation part, there is a question that I would like to bring up to you that we have in the QA right now. The question says, does the AI understand the syntax differences between, say, Cypress, Selenium, Playwright, or Postman well enough to generate the correct native code for each one of them?
Yes. Short answer, yes, it does. Yeah. So great question. So there's a couple of answers to that. One is, since Testkube has access, so if you're an existing Testkube user or you've already used Testkube, there will likely be a bunch of tests in that you've configured Testkube to run for you. So Testkube will know that you're already using Playwright or Cypress for your end-to-end tests, or it'll know what tools you already use. So it's going to ask you at least, or suggest that it looks like you're already using this or that tool. Should we continue using that? If it's something that it's not aware of that you've used before, the skills that we're building to generate these tests will prompt you and ask you, like, which framework do you want to use? What language do you want to use? We understand that not everyone might want to use the model that we think, or the tool or that language that is maybe the most common one or the default one. So we're actively tailoring the skills that we're building to help Testkube build the tests for you, to also prompt users for the input. Obviously, you didn't see any of those prompts here because I wanted to show kind of what the end result would be, but it's a great question. And of course, this is where the AAP, which I'll get back to later, is so important to get you into that and to get your feedback on, hey, we're using this framework with that tool. Can that really work? And how can we make sure that Testkube can generate the tests for PyTest, or I don't know, you name it, some combination of tools, languages that we want to make sure. Okay, final one I want to show is Playwright. So this is a created Playwright test for the To-Do MVC, which is a popular online application. Sorry, hope that answered the question, Lucio. Please get back to me afterwards, otherwise or later. So this is actually now exploring the application using Playwright itself, and creating, as you can see, the Playwright tests here in the middle. And once it's done, it's going to run those tests for me. And this is going to also tap into a parallelization feature that I have in Testkube, where it runs all those Playwright tests in parallel. You'll see here that one of them failed, so it's going to go back and figure out that there was some error with the locators, and it's going to go and hopefully fix that test, and we can look at the output from each of those nodes that was running that Playwright test for me. And the tests here generated in the middle, of course, you will be able to push this to GitHub, right, or to whatever source code management system you're using, so you can take those tests, refine them using your own tooling or your own prompting, push them back so Testkube can pick them up from there, similar to like what you would do with a vibe coding tool like Replit or Lovable, where you'd have a two-way sync with your source code. You'd have a two-way sync here with your automated tests. Okay, so we've seen kind of 3 examples, and I really wanted to highlight here that Testkube is tool agnostic in the sense, right? I was able to generate an API test, load test, an end-to-end test. I can then run those tests inside my infrastructure. We're not kind of tying you into any specific framework, and we like to think that Testkube, or the AI, underlying AI, that the L models that are being used here can generate almost any kind of test, because there's a lot of tests out there that it's been trained on. So let's have a look at this specific workflow, what this looks like in the Testkube dashboard, and some kind of the downstream actions you might want to do. So once again, we can look at that execution that we had. So this was the Playwright test that ran across 5 workers, right? And we have the different results here. Let's go back and look at, I did some previous executions earlier here of that test. And so we can have a look at the one we saw here. We had a failure. So what I'm going to do here is now I'm going to switch to the AI agent functionality. And you can see there's an AI analyze button here at the top. I'm just going to select that. And here, by default, it's going to select the troubleshooting agent, and it's also going to select the default model that I've configured. I'll get back to that a little bit later. And I'm just going to press analyze. And what's happening now is that the agent is now retrieving the logs and the artifacts from that playwright execution. And it's going to take a little time, because it usually takes a little time. And it's going to hopefully give us a somewhat thorough analysis of why that playwright test failed. So, here we go. You can see kind of it's working. So here it's telling me, here's what happened and how to fix it, right? Where's the failure, where's the exact test failure, how to fix the test, and why the rest of the workflow is healthy. So super easy for me, instead of me having to kind of look through the logs, and obviously this is a simplistic example, but you could say that you could be running a playwright test which runs hundreds or thousands of test cases. You have lots of logs to sift through, obviously something that AI would be much more efficient at doing. This was just a really simplistic way to show you how troubleshooting can be invoked directly, or troubleshooting agent can be invoked directly from the dashboard. Let's go back to that specific workflow. It was called to do. We can also ask it to do more an analysis of all of the executions of this workflow, right? So I want a little bit more of a report on the how this test has been behaving over time. Maybe if it can identify some trends. And these are built-in agents into the platform. I'm going to show you that which agents that are included, but of course you can also craft your own agents that I think I've alluded to a couple of times. Let's give this, let me catch my breath. Here we go. So you can see here that it's looking at the executions. It's building a nice table here for me for all my executions, and also giving me like resource usage patterns. It's telling me how much memory, CPU did this test use, and it's going to give me some suggestions on how to improve the execution of this workflow. Obviously simplistic, but let's say you have a playwright test or K6 test that's been running for a week in your environment. Say, hey, analyze how this test has been running over the last week. Tell me what to optimize. Tell me if there are some outliers. Tell me what I can do to improve the execution of tests, to improve the middle bottleneck that we had. There's a lot you can do with these agents. The last one I'm going to show you here is, let's go back to a failed test. Let's just go and see what happens here. Let's just pick up any failed execution. Let's try this one. I'm just going to pick AI Analyze here. And now I'm going to take an agent that actually interacts with Linear, which is the tool that we use internally for all our issue tracking. So for this specific agent, I've configured it to do the troubleshooting, but I've also then asked it to create an issue in Linear, which I can then assign to someone to actually look at. So this is just an example of how you can kind of take that intelligent summary, that triaging that it did, and then push that into another tool. So let's give it some time here. I don't know, Lucy, if you have some questions I can answer while the agent is doing its thing.
That we can actually, one very interesting question that we got earlier, we answered it on text, but I would like to bring it up to also the rest of the audience, is in relation to test creation. And the question goes something along the lines of, if I'm already using AI to generate code, why shouldn't the user use the same AI tool to generate the tests for that code as well? Why is there a need for a separate tool for test creation?
That's a great question. So I think there's a couple of reasons why you would use another tool for a task like creating tests. Because first of all, there's a lot of reasons. One is, like I said before, is that Testkube will have access to a bunch of context around the tests that you've already created for your system. So it'll probably know better about kind of what needs to be tested and what's important. The other thing is around the skills that we're building in Testkube are finely tuned for creating tests, right? So it's similar to if you're using a code reviewing tool versus like, I don't know, Greptile or CodeRabbit versus just asking, your LLM to review your code. Those tools have highly tuned prompt skills internally that will give you much better results from a code review perspective versus just the vanilla LLM. And it'll be same thing for us. We've put a lot of work into making sure that the agents that we have and the functionality we have that will actually create valuable tests out of the box versus something that you would just get from a vanilla prompt. Of course, you can say there's a delta there and you'll have to see if it's worth it. Another thing there is, of course, you need for a test to be you need to give it as much context as possible. Not just the source code of what you've written is not enough context for a good test, because if you've done something wrong in the source code, there's a risk that your test is going to actually just validate that, whatever you've done, right? So it doesn't know how it's supposed to behave. And once again, Testkube can have that context and higher level understanding by you providing it access to, for example, wherever you might be managing your requirements. And you could tie that into the test creation. So take these requirements into account and make that part of the test creation loop in Testkube, and also make that much more repeatable, just to make sure that anyone who creates tests with Testkube has access to the same context for there. So it's also something you could share in team, just to make sure that everyone has, gets the same quality of tests being generated. Great question, though, and something we'll continue to explore. Finally, so just to show here, this is an example of the human in the loop. So this is where it's asking if it's okay to create an issue in linear. I'm going to approve that. So you can here configure what level of what things to do automatically and what things that actually require someone to validate. And it's also asking me to if it wants to update the execution tags on that specific execution. And so finally, here we got a nice analysis of the root cause of what happened and what I should be doing instead. And here is the linear issue. Let me just see. I'm gonna paste that, open that in linear. So here you can see the issue that it created in linear. And of course, I could here assign that to an agent, not in Testkube, but maybe an AI agent that could then work on this issue. And you could have a loop that kind of does that automatically. And then, of course, reruns the tests. You could have a somewhat autonomous loop kicking in. But just as an example, of course, this could have been something created in Jira or any other tool, or it could have been posted to a Slack channel, whatever, however you might want to tie these things together. Okay, talk a lot. I want to take a little bit step back just to talk a little bit more about the agents in Testkube. I'm going to switch over to a Testkube environment that's entirely empty, just to kind of show you what's the empty state of when you get started. So let's say you sign up for a trial for Testkube, or you just create, if you're already existing user, you create a new environment. What agents are there and what can you configure? So if you go to the environment, there's an AI agent setting. There are 4 agents built in, a troubleshooting agent, design, optimize, and analyze, and report, and just a generic helper. You could compare this to like the planning agent and the debugging agent and the ask agent and what's the general agent? I don't know, I'm using Cursor, but I'm sure there's similar default agents in Claude and other tools. But there are also a bunch of default templates. So flaky test detective, smart rerun, I mentioned that earlier, failure categorization, a bunch of agents for infrastructure validator. So this is actually a really interesting agent because it can help you generate infrastructure tests. So it'll create a workflow for you that has basic curl scripts or whatever you might want to validate. So you can say, hey, create a workflow that validates access, validates my Argo CD installation. It'll generate that for you, create that, and immediately allow you to run that, of course, in your clusters or wherever you might want to. So these are the agents that are built in. You can then, of course, connect MCP servers, whichever MCP servers you might want to. These could be, as long as they're hosted somewhere and you have either OAuth or bear token access, you can add those. And we also allow you to browse the official MCP registry. Let's see if we get anything here. Guess not. It's a little bit slow. And then finally, you can configure which models your agents will have access to. So you don't have to use the default OpenAI frontier model that we have, or it's not frontier, it's like GPT 5.1 or 5.2. You can configure whatever models you might want to use. You could use your own local models, open source models. You use Ollama, expose it, use it through ngrok, and then tie it into Testkube if you want to try that approach. Or if you're in an air-gapped environment, you can configure it to use whatever models that you have access to inside your air-gapped environment. So definitely not tying you down to use external models. And especially when it comes to use cases where you consume a lot of tokens, it might be interesting to look at a more non-frontier model or a local model, where you can save definitely on cost. Final thing I want to talk about agents is what we call agent triggers. So the agents that I showed you here, I triggered manually. I could, of course, if we go back here, we have a Testkube AI chat panel where I can select which agents I want to chat with, and I can select which model I want to use, and then I can just ask that agent to do things. So this is similar to like a chat interface that you would have in your coding IDEs or coding tools. But what you can also do is trigger your agents automatically, so based on events. So we call these AI agent triggers. I've set up a very simple one, a failure categorization agent, which kicks in for every failed workflow in our environment. And when it finds a failed workflow, it's going to try to categorize that into different failures like network, infrastructure, etc., and add a tag to that execution so that other people can say, hey, fine, show me all the network errors, and have someone dig through those. You might also have an agent that actually does the actual troubleshooting, but it depends on the process you have. So if we go back, look at our failed executions here, you can see here that this agent has been invoked and added infrastructure, configuration, network failure, kind of categorize these failures for me. And I've actually created some private views here where I can say, hey, these are all the network failures in my environment, and these are all the infrastructure failures that I've recently had, etc. And I can also see that it's always the same test, etc. So a very simplistic case of how you could use it, automate an agent. You could obviously do much more advanced. You could say, the linear agent I had earlier, you'd have the agent that troubleshoots, and you could give it criteria for if these are true, could automatically create an issue in Jira or linear for someone to troubleshoot. Really depends on how much you want to do in those agents. This is one of the areas where token cost can, of course, be an issue. And when we were initially trying this internally, we did bump into excessive use of tokens, especially on the failure categorization. So we had one test that was failing a lot, and that the logs from that test were pretty massive. So we realized that the failure categorization agent was just eating a bunch of tokens to categorize that failure. So something to be mindful of, a place to consider. We're not using a frontier model, especially for analyzing logs. You don't use Opus 4.7, obviously. You can use a much more faster and more affordable model, or maybe even a local model. That's really up to you to figure out what model is good enough for the use cases that you have in mind. Okay, final thing I want to show, Lucio, if you allow me to. It'll only take like 3 minutes.
Go for it. You have all the time. We have a lot of good questions, so I want to make sure that we leave time for the audience.
I promise. Okay. Final thing is, I do want to talk about the MCP server. Oops. There we go. No demo without an error page. Let me just reload that. Here we go. So Testkube MCP Server is available in your control plane. There's a setting under the environment where you can enable it. Here, it'll give you the endpoint, and it'll also give you the configurations to interact with that MCP server. It currently requires a token authentication, but the release that we're doing the end of next week will also support OAuth authentication for this MCP server. And then, of course, it'll automatically inherit the permissions of the user that's doing the authentication. So a much better authentication scheme. And I just want to show you what that looks like. The server exposes 30 tools, I think, which give access to most of the stuff you can do Testkube. So running workflows, getting results, creating workflows, historical data, searching. It's a lot. You can do a lot through that MCP server, and you can go to our docs and see exactly what it does. Let's jump over to Cursor here, and I have prepared a prompt. So I've configured Cursor to connect to the MCP server of that environment. And now I'm going to ask it about that specific to-do MVC playwright workflow, the one that we generated with AI a little bit earlier on in the demo. And Let's see if it manages to do that. You never know. Actually, Lucio, maybe we can start on questions while Sonnet here is doing its thing.
Let's do it. Let's multitask. So we have great questions coming in, and thanks everybody for participating. The engagement has been amazing, Ole. One question around the investigation front, and I believe this is the post-production or post-execution section that you were showing us with the agents. The question reads, trying to understand how flakiness is detected, can we distinguish between infrastructure-induced flakiness versus behavioral or test design issues?
Yeah, that's a great question. And flakiness detection is a great use case for AI because when and I did we're actually going to do a webinar on this later in June, not to plug that in advance, but to go deeper onto that specifically. But if there, since to get a really good picture of what's causing flakiness, so usually flakiness is not flakiness it's just that there's things going on outside the test itself that you don't really know about. So these could be changes to the configuration in your infrastructure. There could be changes in your source code. There could be things going on at the same time while you're running your tests that could be skewing the results or the outcome of your results. So if you give AI access to MCP tools where it can gather that context, so if you give it access to MCP servers for your source code, for your operational metrics from Grafana or Datadog, and from maybe from your Kubernetes runtime, or from anything else that it can kind of all weave together to say, hey, this test failed, 3 times out of 8 at these specific times, but I also saw that actually there was these things going on in your infrastructure at the same times, or there was Kubernetes was doing something, or there's it can pull data from all these sources, so it can say actually that's what was causing the flakiness of that. And I mean, best case, it could even suggest a remediation or kind of how to avoid those problems. You could create a workflow, an agent that, let's say, sorry, getting ahead of myself here, but if that agent identifies the actual reason for flakiness is because there's some other job running at the same time, which puts load on your system, and that kind of causes things to slow down, you could then going back to the intelligent test execution part that I talked about earlier. You could create an agent that before you run your test to make sure that everything, the coast is clear, now it's time to run my test, right? So it could help you kind of intelligently execute the tests when you have. Obviously, this is not the button to click and it's all up there and running. It takes some work to get those prompts and everything into place, but it's definitely, so once again, flakiness is a great use case for AI, just because usually the reason for flakiness is buried somewhere in the data that you have, and that's something that AI is really good at.
And Ole, one last thing, since you are right now on the MCP part of the demo, there is another question here. I'll add it to the stage really quick. It reads, and thank you, Joao, for this question. Can I use Testkube MCP for creating and running tests as part of my AI native development workflow?
So you can create, yes, so put it that way. You can use your AI tool. So let's say you're in Claude. You can use Claude to generate your tests for you. And then you can use the Testkube MCP server to run those tests for you. The AI test creation that we have, kind of the built-in Testkube, is not exposed through the MCP server, right? You can use external models and tools to generate tests, but if you want to kind of hook into the secret sauce that we have in Testkube for building tests, those are, for now at least, only available through the Testkube dashboard. I'm not saying that, if people come to us and say, hey, we would really like to be able to use your MCP server to also create tests because it's just so much better than everything else, then I'm sure we will oblige and figure some way to. But for now, the approach is you would prompt your model in Codex or whatever to generate your tests for you, and then using the Testkube MCP server, you could then run those tests in yours, create the test workflow for those tests, and then it can help you run those tests in your infrastructure. It won't be as smooth as an experience as it will be in the recording I showed you earlier today, but it's definitely doable. Okay, we can just see the output here. It did automatically, it kind of analyzed all the executions I had for that to-do MVC test. Not super impressive, I guess, because there weren't a lot of executions here. But ultimately, it showed here that it did use a bunch of tools exposed by the MCP server to get a high-level picture of how this test is run, how it's been performing, how much memory it's been consuming, etc., all that kind of stuff. I can show you. I did obviously preparing for this a little bit, and this is I was using this for do a flakiness analysis of this is our own end-to-end tests that we run for Testkube itself, and I asked it to do a nice analysis of that. So it kind of broke down failure classes and associated those with infrastructure. It had thousands of test executions to look at, so you can see here it worked for a while. The cool thing is at the end it also generated a really nice canvas for me. Let's see if we can see that, where it kind of broke down everything, and this is all based on the data that Cursor was able to pull from the Testkube platform through the Testkube MCP server. So you can do very potent stuff from an external tool just with the MCP server and your coding tools. And I will stop talking about the MCP server there. And going back to the presentation, I think I've showed you everything I wanted to show you. Seeing is believing. I hope you're a believer now. Back to you, Lucio.
Absolutely. Before we jump in,
of course.
Yeah, before we jump in the Q&A, we have a lot of questions, so I'm going to run through these very briefly. As Ole mentioned earlier, we have, and I believe I also did the introduction, Testkube AI we have an early access program that you can join today. So either go to testkube.io/EAP or scan the QR code that you see on the screen right now. You will give us a couple of your information, and then you can go ahead and join the early access program, where you will have early access to all the features that you're seeing in the demo today, and also newer features that we will continue adding to Testkube AI in the very, very near future. Not only that, the 10 qualified accounts that join in today, or after the first 10 accounts that join, or people that join, will have also access to the person that is talking to you right now and giving you this awesome demo, and all the masterminds behind Testkube AI, so you can give us feedback. We will help you with your use cases. We will get on the phone with you and help you with all the cool things that you want to do with Testkube AI. So go again to testkube.io/EAP or scan the QR code that you see in there, so you can apply for the early access program. So with that, now let's go ahead and jump into the Q&A. I want to be respectful of our audience's time, but also I'm very excited about all the engagement that we have here. So Ole, I have some questions.
Yes.
I am going to, you already answered some of them, and let me go ahead here to the list. There's a lot of them, and I'm very excited. And they're really good. One of them reads the following: which agent or LLM model is being used underneath for Testkube, for the a little bit of grammar, for the Testkube AI agents? And also, can you address the cost on tokens?
Great question. So by default, I think it's GPT-5.2 that we use for if you go like sign up for a trial account in the cloud in our dashboard. Like I said earlier, you can switch out to your own models, whatever, and provide your own endpoints and tokens for OpenAI, and then configure which or Anthropic, and configure which models you want to expose in Testkube. The default one is GPT 5.1 or 5.2. I'm not exactly sure. That's the one that we've been using. And the other question on token cost, great question, and it's interesting to see how that's becoming a concern as people on board use more AI more and more. And I think I mentioned earlier that for some of the tasks that you ask AI to do in context of Testkube, like analyzing logs, you definitely don't need the latest frontier model. You can get very far with an older model, or maybe even a local model. So I would definitely, especially if you're automating things and that agents that run often. So that's definitely something to look into. We're going to be adding features where you can see token consumption per agent, per environment, per whatever, so you can really kind of see how much you're consuming for all the testing related activities that you're doing through Testkube, and also be able to configure caps, so you can say this agent should not use more. You can also you'll also be able to say which models an agent should use, so the failure categorization agent should use, I don't know, GPT 5.1, and the remediation agent maybe should use 5.5, because you want to make sure that works well.
Excellent, thank you. Another question that came in is, can we, actually, regarding load testing, are there any restrictions on the number of users per agent and the total number of agents that can be used for large scale load testing?
No, Testkube uses runners inside your Kubernetes infrastructure to run your tests and also your load tests. We don't impose any real limitations. The limitations will be based on the infrastructure, the capacity that you assign to those runners in Kubernetes. So if you want to run a JMeter K6 whatever test that generates 1 million VUs, as long as you give the Testkube runners in your Kubernetes infrastructure enough memory and CPU to do that, go for it. It'll work out. There's no limitation on in the Testkube side of things. Testkube does not have a consumption-based licensing model, so we you can run as many tests as you want, as much in parallel as you want, and whatever. We're not going to charge you more because it's running in your infrastructure, consuming your resources. So there's no technical limits on how much load you can create imposed by Testkube. It'll be imposed by your infrastructure.
Thank you for sharing that. One more, how does Testkube AI get access to my context lake in order to have access to all the metadata needed to understand the whole complexity of my cloud native product and create a really good test?
So great question. This is where the MCP servers come in again. So you'll have to provide add the MCP servers that can ultimately give access to that context. So let's say you're managing the source code for all your cloud native application in GitHub or GitLab or Bitbucket. You'd have to add the MCP servers for those tools. Give the test creation access to the tools in those MCP servers, and then of course also tell Testkube, what to look at. If you're just going to ask it to look at my repo, that's going to be an expensive and long-running operation. So, but ultimately, the key here is really the MCP servers, and which can then pull in data. But like I said earlier, it doesn't have to be source code. It could be requirements that you have captured in your Jira issues or whatever system you're using. It could be Confluence or it could be Linear.
That is an excellent follow-up to the next question, which is, can I feed my existing manual test cases to auto-convert them into automated Testkube workflows? And I believe we're talking here about test creation.
Well, ultimately, that's a use case we will want to solve for. I think for now, it's very much prompt-based, but ultimately you could say a manual test case is a prompt. So if you say, hey, this is I'd like you to, if you have that manual test case written as a sequence of steps, and you could basically say these are the sequence steps I want you to do, create a playwright test for that. I would expect Testkube to be able to do that. I don't know how advanced the syntax of those manual tests are, or if they're captured inside some test management tool that also does branching and all those kind of things that you might have for a manual test case. If you can extract it in a format that then Testkube could digest and use as input to the test creation agents, then that would be doable. I think we're going to start with the prompts that I showed you here, but this is a great reason you should join the EAP, so we can make sure that we cover those use cases in our roadmap. Maybe not in the initial release, but we want to make everyone happy. So that's something we definitely want to cater to.
Absolutely, Kip. And again, I want to remind everyone, just in case you missed it, testkube.io/EAP to join the early access program to get first-hand access to Ole and the team behind this, and also you will get help from us to help you implement all this cool thing in your environment. More questions, Ole. Do you need any additional configuration to create the test in your repo and follow the same design pattern within your repo?
That's a good question. So configuration in your repo to follow the design pattern for your existing tests. So the test creation will work both off an existing test repo. So you can say, hey, here's my repo containing my tests. I want you to add another test for it. And you'd want it to add tests in the style of your existing tests. I would guess here, once again, and this is where context matters, that the prompts that you craft should teach, and maybe there's an agents MD file in your repo that Testkube will be able to use when it creates tests. So it's I'll say yes if it has the context to be able to do so.
Right.
But once again, join the EAP. Share the repo with us, or like talk to us, and would love to make sure that we work and generate tests that kind of live up to the standards and the conventions that you've decided on in your repos and for your tests.
Great. How do I prevent the AI agent, and this is about the agents that you were showing us earlier, from fixing a test that is actually revealing a genuine bug in the application code?
That's a great question, and I think this is a super interesting thing that maybe some of you have bumped into, where the AI kind of doesn't really understand what's wrong. It kind of thinks
Right.
sometimes it modifies the test because it thinks the test is what's wrong. So I'll go back to context, right? Make sure that AI knows, give it requirements from some external tool. You could also add other AI in to review the output of what the AI did to get a second opinion. I'm sure. I mean, AI is not deterministic, neither are people. So I'm sure there's going to be areas where it'll get wrong. And there's also a loop here. All the agent stuff that I showed you, I can promise that the first time we did like failure categorization, it went horribly wrong. And then we had to really iterate on that loop. One thing that's actually really interesting that I didn't mention was AI is really good at creating prompts and agents. So many of the agents the default agents that we have or templates were initially created with AI, where it's like, hey, I'd like to have an agent that does flakiness analysis. Provide me the prompt that does that in a deterministic way using these tools. And AI will be really good at giving you a really lengthy prompt. And you can be specific to say, hey, it has to work with a non-frontier model and it has to be blah, blah, blah. So a tip is for improving determinism and specificity in your agents and just prompts in general is to ask AI for help in creating those prompts and those agents. This is a little bit of a segue, but it's something that I've been continuously amazed at. Why didn't I think of actually using AI to help me create agents and prompts?
I know we're in time, but we're going to keep rolling because these questions are on fire, Ule. We have another
Let's do
one.
it.
There's another one here from Joao. He's saying, not clear if I can create custom agents in Testkube AI for performing specific tasks via specific triggers, manual or on-demand, scheduled, predefined hooks, trigger via MCP, etc.
Okay. I apologize for not making that clear. I don't want to go back into demo mode because it'll take a while, but
Right.
Joe, please reach out and yes, so you can definitely craft the prompts and the MCPs. You can connect whichever MCP servers you want for the agents. You can tell it, give exact access to which tools and which MCP servers it should be able to talk to and to do what, etc. So thanks for calling that out. And I do realize now, thinking about that, I wasn't clear on that. But yes, you can definitely prompt that. I didn't show it. But if once again, happy to get on one-on-one with anyone who wants to. Obviously, I'm super enthusiastic about all this stuff. So happy to get on one-on-ones and just do short demos. And if you have specific use cases in mind, especially, how can I do an agent that selects which tests to run or optimizes the memory usage of blah, blah, blah. Right. Let us know. And that's also part of the white glove treatment that you mentioned for the EAP, right, Lucio? That people who are early into the EAP and are also people that we want to really work really closely with to make sure that they get value out of the AI features that we already have and that we are building. I don't know if I answered your question, Joe, but I am calling you out to reach out afterwards.
I think Joao is nodding. We cannot see you, Joao. But
awesome.
One more. Test creation functionality is nice. We plan to use BDD to come up with scenarios which will drive development and testing. Is this assumption okay that Testkube can refer these scenarios and generate automated tests and execute the same?
I would like to think so. So you use BDD to define your what do they call scenarios?
Scenarios, yeah.
And then I don't know if you would want AI to like run those scenarios for you. So agents to the rescue. I'm sure you could build an agent to do that. It's Well, it's something that we've kind of considered initially. I think we've considered more of, in the case, like translating the BDD to a playwright test, which would then be run by Testkube, versus an agent just executing, like making API calls or automating a browser through Playwright MCP. Please join the EAP so we can make sure that works, or at least we get it on the roadmap in a sufficient way. Yeah, that's the answer I'll have for you right now. So thanks, good question though.
And then there is another one. I'm assuming the predefined public models don't allow data or sources code to be trained. Is there a token? I think this goes back to the token conversation, Ole. Is there a token usage license model on top of the base license, right? And I believe that is part of the EAP, right? We want to use, understand the usability, etc., before we implement a model to Joao's point. Is there anything you would like to add?
So ultimately, the model that we provide to you is capped at some limit. So, and for our the one that we provide for free, and our commercial customers all use their own models, and then of course token limits are with whatever subscriptions you would have with OpenAI or Anthropic or whatever you're using. To that end, we don't have our own like cost pricing model on top of agents at this point. We're still kind of in an exploration mode. That not saying that we might not have in the future, as we kind of figure out kind of how this all works and where the most of the value is. But for now, any token usage cost that you have will be from the LLM provider that you connect into Testkube. I don't know if that answered the right question, but
I think you did.
Okay.
I have faith in you, Ole. And last question before we go. Actually, let me go ahead and, while I ask that question, let me go ahead and launch this poll. I should have done this a while ago, but is in relation to the EAP. So if you want to join the EAP, please let us know. We will be more than happy. While we encourage you to go to the URL that we're showing there, we also can enroll you, so you don't have to go deal with that. We can help you. So the poll should be on your screen right now. Let us know if you would like to be part of the EAP or if you would like us to send you some information. Last question from Eric. Ole, right now the LLM configuration is global and shared across all Testkube agents or AI agents and environments. We see the need for an environment slash agent specific LLM configuration. Any upcoming feature to allow that?
It is now. Not immediately. We are making some improvements to LLM configurations, specifically driven by asks from one of our own air-gapped customers. But I don't know if it's override at the environment level. Eric, please get back to us on that. But otherwise, definitely we'll add it to our backlog and roadmap. I think it's really interesting to see. We're discovering kind of how all those more advanced use cases around just what you asked, kind of using specific LLMs for specific tasks in specific environments, and especially in air gapped, et cetera, et cetera. And it's a really interesting space looking forward, and obviously something that we're super interested. We want to make sure that Testkube works with whatever LLM constraints or models that you have, and that might be kind of related, organizational or otherwise. So please reach out, Eric. Just want to make sure we capture that. One thing I do want to say, I know I was talking a lot about doing everything in Testkube. You can obviously, like I said, you can still use your own coding assistance if you like. Someone asked, right? Can I create my tests in external tools and then in a different tool and then use Testkube to run it? Of course, right? We're just going to say that the out of the box experience tests that you'll get from Testkube will probably be better than what you'll get. But if you're comfortable and you've crafted your skills in Claude or Cursor, or built a bunch of really spent effort in that, it'll create great tests for you. Continue doing that, and then use the MCP server or use just we said there were 3 bottlenecks, right? So if you've already figured out the first one on test creation, great, stay there, and problem solved. And then maybe Testkube can help you solve the other two about running all those tests more efficiently, and then doing all the troubleshooting, triaging, remediation stuff further down the line. So you don't have to use all things in parallel. You can just pick which one you think adds most value to your pipeline, to your team, and whatever, and stick with what you already have. So if it ain't broke, don't fix it.
There you go. On that note, Ole, thank you so much for everything that we saw today. This is fantastic. Super excited to see what is next. And thank you for to the audience for being here today, for giving us your time and attention. With that said, this is going to be available on demand. Stay tuned for more details, more information, and more webinars that we have available in testkube.io. And that's it, Ole. Congratulations. This is amazing. Thank you so much, everyone.
Thanks so much, everyone, for joining. Please reach out, LinkedIn, whatever, if you have follow-up questions. Looking forward to talking to any one of you about AI testing.
Excellent.
Awesome.
All right, Ole, thank you so much. You are the audience. We are Testkube. Stay healthy, stay well. We'll see you soon.
Bye.
Bye-bye.